In '95 I was invited by the painter Michel Frère to shape the catalogue for a solo exhibition in a museum, and I was not allowed to write the text. The director of the museum didn't want me to write the text, and maybe at that time I knew a little bit more about painting already, but yeah, very often in the art world there are power balances that have to be conserved, and in this case it was decided that I could not write about it. But I already had learned something about painting, of course, of Michel himself, but also of Walter Swennen. And I understood that the texture of the painting was very important. And my proposition for the catalogue was to print a giant poster, a real size poster of a painting by Michel, with a lot of colors, let's say 10 colors, to print the text on the back side, but to allow people to live with a very, very, very nice reproduction of a painting by Michel. But the director replied that the museum had never made such big posters, so this was not a good idea. Quickly about the text. The text itself, written by a guy that was very powerful and that in a magazine, in the press, had expressed his dismay about the fact that I had been invited to make the big catalogue about Panomarenko. Of all people, why me? Not understanding that nobody invited me to do whatsoever. I made the book about Panomarenko without being invited by anybody, without being paid. I just did it because I needed the urge to do it. For example, here I asked Philippe de Gobert to make photographs of a sculpture by Michel Frère, and then have the sculpture turn, and at the same time the position of the camera changes, it shifts. So I think the camera went slightly up or slightly down, and so to make a flip book, this is a flip book. Of course, this is to show what sculpture is about, etc. To show a sculpture, of course, with minimal means. So the guy said, we never printed such a giant poster, as if it would be an argument. But after the discussion, we walked through the museum and the whole floor was covered with gigantic posters of a show of William Turner in the same museum. So he had just been lying. I've never understood why people do this. This is an example of one of these very first paintings of Michel Frère, made right after the ones that represented skulls. I spoke about it in the previous film about Michel Frère. Here we still notice a hidden face, I think. And it's the example of the first painting without skulls. It's also one of the first times, as I already said, I understood that giving feedback to a painter could be very useful. So not being allowed to make this poster, a real size poster, I decided to have a photographer make large ectas, very large photographs, slides, very large slides, to be able to print paintings one-on-one in this book. I forgot to say something about the text. Yes, I said that it was written by this guy that attacked me in the press for no reason, but then the text just tells the reader that Michel Frère admires Frank Auerbach and Eugène Leroy, and then it proceeds to state that Michel Frère's work is much better. than the work of these two masters, which I think is a totally idiotic argument. It makes no sense. So it's rather painful to have to make a book and type such idiotic text. Look at this, look at this. As I said in the other movie, finally Michel Frére's ideal was to create paintings in which he could juxtapose colors that came from the depth of the painting. These paintings are landscapes. It's the little dots of color. There's always some purple somewhere. On top we have the blue sky. At the bottom we have the red suggestion of the soil. The border-like addition of the small sky reminds us of how Walter Swennen tries to confine his paintings to prevent you from having the idea that they prolong themselves beyond the frame, as do drawings in comic books. See, it's of course the evocation of a sky, just as this part evokes the soil in a landscape painting. Yeah, so to prevent you to think that the painting represents or creates an image that extends itself beyond the frame, Walter Swennen very often puts borders. And Michel was an admirer of Walter Swennen. He owned his painting Carol, the painting that actually is the reproduction of a children's drawing by a girl named Carol, and it represents a kind of a skull. It's a blue painting with blue and red painting, a crying skull it seems. The amazing part about these paintings is that they start from the idea of Barbizon, the landscape painters in France, but they're all so different. They all have another vibration, another movement. Some of these paintings weighed 400 kilos. He worked 3 months on them. He made 4 a year. One of the things that bugged me making this book was that nearly all the paintings Michel had made the last 4 years were unsold. I think he only had sold 1 or 2. And Panomarenko had taught me that you could never tell people that paintings were unsold, that works of art were unsold. When I made this 92 catalog, 1/3 of all the sculptures of Panomarenko were still in galleries. And one thing Panomarenko did was, when I had finished the book, just before printing it, he removed all the names of the gallery. So all the works of art where there is no owner mentioned were unsold. So I told this director during a second meeting, please do not make me mention where these paintings are, because specialists can see in one glance that Michel has not sold more than 1 painting the last 4 years, knowing that he only made 4 a year. This was not really information to be spread. But I think the museum director saw this catalog as a kind of publicity folder or something for the galleries. He thought he had to help the galleries by showing everybody that these paintings were still for sale. Totally idiotic. So I kept on insisting and asking him, please don't make me do this, it's not good for Michel. And at some point Michel Frère turned towards me and he said, Hans, laisse tomber. And we mentioned all the galleries. And I have never been able to undo myself of the impression that's one of the reasons why Michel died 4 years later. The last time I saw Michel Frère was at the dinners at Andrea Bardos's, and he was very angry. And I asked him, why are you so angry? And he said, personne ne comprend comment c'est difficile de peindre. Nobody understands how difficult it is.